Buongiorno! Welcome back to the course on design of information systems. I'm going to present to you today a paper that was written for an educators symposium. An educators symposium is a scientific event that takes care about teaching matters in modeling, and I've presented this paper some years ago, but there are still some nice ideas around, and it's worth to discuss the content of this paper. Basically, what the paper is about, it is about, let us jump into this part. This paper, this teaching unit, comprises several descriptions of the same simple library system formulated on different abstraction levels, from informal over formal to an executable abstraction level, and the formulations are in different styles. For example, in an object-oriented design-like style, in a relational database style, or in a style more close to the programming language Java. There is an overview on the different specifications, on the different models that are presented here. So we will start with an informal description. I already said the system that is going to be described is a system for a library about users who can borrow exemplars in books in a particular library. So first we will have a verbal informal description, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 formal descriptions, 6 descriptions in terms of a use model. And these 6 different descriptions focus on different language features that are available in use. So the first and the starting description here is that is called max infs min prepose, and in this description a lot of use is made for invariants and not so much use about pre and post conditions. Then there is a second description that does not use invariants at all but puts everything into the pre and post conditions. A third description concentrates completely on the post conditions. It is a description that uses complete frame conditions. I mentioned already there is a description that is more Java-like, and this is this description, ASAC to atre. In this description, all the associations that have been used here are transformed into attributes. Then there is a description which is more in the style of a relational database system. And then there is a description which is looking at particular invariants, and this description is using generalization or superclasses to have a better description of the invariants. So these 5 models are the 7 models from informal to formal are the subject of our discussion for today. Let us start here with the informal description. The informal description comes in two parts. There is first a text here describing part of the system, and then there is a second text where you see some parts are missing. There are placeholders. It's a so-called closed text. And that's already the first exercise for you. We'll start with this text here, which introduces first aspects of the system, and then your task should be to replace here the placeholders with the appropriate words, with the appropriate notion that comes here from the first part. So let us go into the details here. Yeah, the example describes a digital support system for a library. The library offers book copies to users. A user can borrow a copy, or in other words an exemplar of a book. A book is characterized by an author list, a year of publication, and a unique title. A copy is determined by the number of return actions of the copy, the book of which the copy is an exemplar of, and a unique signature. A user has an address and a unique name. At most, one user can borrow a copy of a book at one particular point in time. Book, copy, and user properties are first manipulated by initialization actions. Both users and copies are able to perform actions for borrowing and returning. So this is the introductory text, and now the part of the text that has some placeholders in it, a closed text. And in mind you have to replace here the particular placeholders with the appropriate notion, with the appropriate word that I've used before. Additionally, certain conditions must hold. If properties such as author, title, XYZ, address, and XYZ are described by strings, the string is not allowed to be undefined or to be equal to the empty string. A year of XYZ is equal to or greater than 1455, the year in which the Gutenberg Bible was published. XYZ, having borrowed a copy of a particular XYZ, is not allowed to borrow another copy of the same book at the same time. An XYZ can appear at most once in an XYZ list. Finally, as already indicated above, certain properties such as X1, X2, and X3 are unique. Initialization, borrow, and XYZ actions have to respect the above XYZs. They can only be performed meaningfully in reasonable situations. They have to fulfill their expected functionality. So this is the first description, the informal description. As mentioned, please substitute here the placeholders and look for the proper words, the proper notions from the first part, first exercise here. Let us directly jump to, here I said the first description, the formal term, the abbreviation that I've used is max_inf min prepose, so maximal knowledge is put into the invariants and only few knowledge is put into the pre and post conditions. And this is the first subsection here on this part. And there is a class diagram here in this first part for the model maxInfs min prepose. Indeed, the first two models, namely the formal model maxInfs min prepose and the second model max prepose, they have the same class diagram as we see over here. The paper itself, you see some 44 pages here overall in the PDF. The paper itself that was presented at the conference, at the event, has 13 pages. There is a so-called addendum, an appendix to this paper, a longer appendix of some 30 pages, and all the details of the models, of the 6 different models, are given here together with examples in this appendix. So I will discuss the first model, maxInfs min prepose, now by the material here in the appendix, and as you see here now, the class diagram. Naturally, I will start with the class diagram. The class diagram is rather simple. It has 3 classes: a class user, a class copy, and a class book. There are these classes copy and there's a class book. So the distinction is as follows. The class copy describes entities, things that you have in your shelf, or things that lie on the table, and the thing that you can take into hand and you can browse through the book, and it's a thing that has pages. It's a copy, it's an exemplar. So it's a physical thing that is standing in the library, made of paper. There is a non-physical thing behind, so to speak, behind this, the copy or the exemplar that you have in your hands, and that is a book. The book is something that you cannot touch, but the book exists only in our mind. Another probably physical entity here in this system is the user, and the user is borrowing copies, and these copies belong to particular books, or are, one could say, a copy is a materialization of a particular book. So let us start the discussion of the class diagram over here. A book has a title, which is a string. A book has an attribute author sequence, which is a sequence of string. A book has a year, which is the year of publication. That's an integer. Let us first go through the attributes. A copy or an exemplar has a signature. So when you go to a library, then you have typically the book has a particular number, or librarians call it a signature. So on the back there is or inside the book there is a number, and that's a signature of the book. And another attribute of the book here is a number of times the book has been returned. So this num returns, the integer, is an indication how often the copy has been borrowed. The borrowing takes place by users. A user has a name and an address, let us now come to the associations. The first association, mentioned it already, there is this association belongs to. a copy belongs to one particular book. So I've used here multiplicities to sharpen the associations, and on the role name book, I have indicated here that a copy belongs to exactly one book. On the other hand, for one book, there may be many copies. We will see this in the example, in an example object diagram in a minute. Multiplicities are also used here on the other side. On the other association, we have the association borrows, user borrows copy. A user may borrow many copies, and on the other hand, a copy may not be borrowed at all. That's the zero case here. Or the copy may be borrowed by exactly one user. So with the multiplicities here, the particular restrictions come in. Name of the class, attributes of the class, associations in which the class, respectively the objects from the class, participate, and then there are the actions or the operations that are possible for objects of the particular class. So there's an init action, init operation, where a book is initialized with a title, with an author sequence, and the year of publication. There's also an init action for the copy objects, where the signature of the copy is specified, and it is specified which book the copy belongs to. This parameter here of this operation will describe here this association. Please note in the init operation here, this attribute is not provided here. What will be done is that when the init action takes place, it will initialize the number of returns to be 0. Users can also be initialized with a name and an address for the attributes over here. And then we have, in order to manipulate this association borrows, there is an operation borrow and return in the user class, and there is an operation borrow and return in the copy class. So, roughly speaking, the operations borrow in the class user, in the class copy, are responsible for establishing a link here, and the operations return in user and return in copy are responsible for taking away a link, a connection between a user and a copy, when the copy is returned. So sort of this I wanted to have this symmetry in the example that the association can be manipulated from both sides, and this more or less corresponds, so to speak, to the fact that a user can decide to borrow a copy, and a copy can decide to be borrowed by a particular user. That's for the borrow actions, and the return actions, the return operations. The user can decide to return a particular copy, and a copy can decide to be returned because it is borrowed. So that's the option for the copy here. Please note There are in 3 of these 4 operations there is a parameter. In the return there is no parameter. In the return of the copy there is no parameter, because the copy is, when the copy decides to be returned, it is assuming that it is associated with the user. So this was a little bit on the class diagram. Let us look at one particular object diagram. So this is an object diagram that describes a possible situation that can be reached by executing operations. So we have here 2 user objects, Ada and Bob. We have 2 book objects, Date and El-Masri Nawate. These are 2 books on database systems, Introduction to Database Systems, Fundamentals of Database Systems. The author is here a gentleman called Date, and the authors are here 2 writers, El-Masri and Nawate. That's also the reason. So for a book can have more than one author, and the author list here, the author sequence is here just a one sequence with 1 element, and here it is a sequence with 2 elements. 1 author, 2 authors. Yeah, you see the title and the year of publication. Then we have 2 copies of the date book, and we have only 1 copy of the book by El-Masri Nawate. So 3 links here. This is the belongs to association, or these are links belonging to the belongs to association, and this is a link associated with the borrows, association. And as you see here, Bob has borrowed currently no books and no copies, and Ada has borrowed the copy DBS 42. And as you see here, the copies, the 2 copies can be distinguished by the signature. DBS 42 and DBS 43, 2 different signatures for, in quotes, the same book. The same book has two copies, 2 exemplars here. Let us look at the sequence of operations that has led to this object diagram. This is the sequence diagram that describes a sequence of operations to reach it. Let us look in the first part a little bit closer first. So first Ada is created, then Bob is created, 2 users, then the date book is created, then there is a copy created for the DBS 42 for the date book. Then directly Ada decides, the copy decides to be borrowed by Ada. So this link here comes from this operation here, and then we have some further actions. Another book is introduced. 2 copies of the book, of this book, are introduced. Both the book and the copies are initialized, and then there are some borrow and return actions going on here with the books, and in total this leads to the sequence of commands leads to this object diagram.